Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Vrajajanaranja Yashodanandana Vrajajanaranja Yashodanandana Vrajajanaranja Yashodanandana Vrajajanaranja Jamunatira Vanachari Jamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Vrajajanaranja Yashodanandana Vrajajanaranja Jamunatira Vanachari Jamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajagacharya Stotar Shri Srimad Bhai Charadar Vinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajagacharya Stotar Shri Srimad Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasri Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gogopinath Sham Kund Radha Kund Giri Govardhan Ki Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Shri Mayapur Navadip Dham Ki Shri Jagannath Puri Ki Tulsi Devi Bhakti Devi Ki Jamuna Devi Ganga Devi Ki Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. Go Premanande Haribol. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Sarasatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye. We're continuing with our reading of the Srimad Bhagavatam. This is Canto 7, Chapter 9. Prahlad pacifies the Lord with prayers. Text number 10. Biprad Dvishad Guna Yutad Arabinda Nabha Biprad Dvishad Guna Yutad Arabinda Nabha Biprad Vishad Guna Yutad Aravinda Nabha Padaravinda Vimukhat Swapacham Varishtam Padaravinda Vimukhat Swapacham Varishtam Padaravinda Vimukhat Swapacham Varishtam Manye Tadarpita Mano Vachane Hitarta Manye Tadarpita Mano Vachane Hitarta Manye Tadarpita Mano Vachane Hitarta Pranam Punati Sa Kulam Na Tu Bhurimanaha Pranam Punati Sakulam Na Tu Bhurimanaha Pranam Punati Sakulam Natu Bhurimanaha Biprad Vishad Guna Yutada Davinda Nabha Padaravinda Vimukhat Swapacham Varishtam Manyeta Darpita Mano Vachane Hitarta Pranam Punati Sakulam Natu Bhurimanaha Viprad Vishad Guna Yuthat Aravinda Nabha Padaravinda Vimukhat Swapacham Varishtam Manye Tadarpita Mano Vachane Hitarta Pranam Punati Sakulam Nata Bhurimanaha Viprad Vishad Guna Yutada Ravinda Nabha Padaravinda Vimukhat Swapacham Varishtam Manyeta Darpita Mano Vachane Hitarta Pranam punati sakulam natu bhuri manaha. Viprad Vishad Gunayatara Rabindanabha. Padaravinda Vibhukachvapacham Varishtam. Manyeta Darpipanamo Vachane Hitarta. Nam Punati Sakulam Natapuri Manaha. Vaishnavis. Viprad Vishad Gunayutada Ravindanabha. Adavinda Vimukhat Shrapacham Varishtam. Nyeta Darpita Bano Ehitarta. Pranam Punati Sakula Natupuri Manaha. Ek or Unamas. Viprad Vishad Gunayutat Aravindanabha. Padaravinda Vimukhat Shrapacham Varishtam. Manyeta Darpata Manovachane Hitarta. Pranam Punati Sakulam Nataburi Manaha. Viprat. Then a Brahmana. Dvishat Gunayutat. Qualified with 12 Brahminical qualities. And there's a footnote, you don't have to repeat, I'll just read it. These are the 12 qualities of a perfect Brahmana. Following religious principles, speaking truthfully, controlling the senses by undergoing austerities and penances, being free from jealousy, being intelligent, being tolerant, creating no enemies, performing yajna, giving charity, being steady, being well versed in Vedic study, and observing vows. Arabindanabha, Lord Vishnu, who has a lotus growing from his navel. Pada Aravinda, to the lotus feet of the Lord. Vimukhat, not interested in devotional service. Shwapacham, one born in a low family, or a dog eater. Vajishtam, more glorious. Manye, I consider. Tadarpita, surrendering unto the lotus feet of the Lord. Manaha, his mind. Vachana, words. Ihita, every endeavor. Artha, wealth. Pranam, and life. Punati, purifies. Saha, he, the devotee. Kulam, his family. Na, not. Tu, but. Purimanaha, one who falsely thinks himself to be in a prestigious condition. Translation. If a Brahmana has all 12 of the Brahminical qualifications, as they are stated in the book called Sanat Sujata, but is not a devotee and is averse to the lotus feet of the Lord, he is certainly lower than a devotee who is a dog eater, but who has dedicated everything, mind, words, activities, wealth, and life, to the Supreme Lord. Such a devotee is better than such a brahmana because the devotee can purify his whole family, whereas the so-called brahmana, in a position of false prestige, cannot purify even himself. Would you like to repeat? If a brahmana has all 12 of the Brahminical qualifications, as they are stated in the book called Sanat Sujata, but is not a devotee, and is averse to the lotus feet of the Lord, he is certainly lower than a devotee who is a dog eater, but who has dedicated everything, mind, words, activities, wealth, and life, to the Supreme Lord. Such a devotee is better than such a brahmana because the devotee can purify his whole family, whereas the so-called brahmana, in a position of false prestige, cannot purify even himself. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Here is a statement by Prahlad Maharaj, one of the 12 authorities regarding the distinction between a devotee and a brahmana expert in karmakanda, or Vedic ritualistic ceremonies. There are 4 varnas and 4 ashramas which divide human society, but the central principle is to become a first-class pure devotee. It is said in the Hari Bhakti Sudodaya, Bhagavad Bhakti Hinasya Jati Shastram Japastapa Apranasya Dehasya Mandanam Lokaranjanam. If one is born in a high family like that of a brahmana, kshatriya, or vaishya, but is not a devotee of the Lord, all his good qualifications as a brahmana, kshatriya, or vaishya are null and void. Indeed, they are considered decorations of a dead body. In this verse, Prahlad Maharaj speaks of the Vipras, the learned brahmanas. The learned brahmana is considered best among the divisions of brahmana, kshatriya, vaishya, and shudra. But a devotee born in a low Chandala family is better than such brahmanas, not to speak of the kshatriyas, vaishyas, and others. A devotee is better than anyone, for he is in the transcendental position on the Brahman platform. Mam chayo vyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatityaitan brahmabhuyaya kalpate. One who engages in full devotional service, who does not fall down in any circumstance, at once transcends the modes of material nature and thus comes to the level of Brahman. That's from the Bhagavad Gita 14:26. The 12 qualities of a first-class Brahmana, as stated in the book called Sanat Sujata, are as follows. Jnanam cha satyam cha dhamma shutam cha yamat saryam hrish titikshana suya jagnas cha dhanam cha dhritir shamash cha mahavrata dvadasha brahmanasya. The European and American devotees in the Krishna consciousness movement are sometimes accepted as brahmanas, but the so-called caste brahmanas are very much envious of them. In answer to such envy, Prahlad Maharaj says that one who has been born in a brahmana family but is falsely proud of his prestigious position cannot even purify himself, not to speak of his family, whereas if a chandal, a low-born person, is a devotee and has fully surrendered unto the lotus feet of the Lord, he can purify his entire family. We have had actual experience of how Americans and Europeans, because of their full Krishna consciousness, have purified their whole families. So much so that a mother of a devotee, at the time of her death, inquired about Krishna with her last breath. Therefore, it is theoretically true and has been practically proven
that a devotee can give the best service to his family, his community, his society, and his nation. The foolish accuse a devotee of following the principle of escapism, but actually the fact is that a devotee is the right person to elevate his family. A devotee engages everything in the service of the Lord, and therefore he is always exalted. Om Ajnanatimidandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilidham Dena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manopishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Katahmaya Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Yuta Padakamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavanscha Sri Rupa Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sadvadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunya Paschatya Deshatarine Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Namine Shri Varshabha Navidevi Daitaya Kripabdaye Krishna Sambandha Vijnana Dayane Pravave Namaha Madhuryo Jvala Premadya Shri Rupa Nuga Bhaktida Shri Gaura Karuna Shakti Vigrahaya Namostute Namaste Gauravani Shri Murtaye Dinatarine Rupa Nuga Virudhapa Siddhanta Dvanta Harine Namo Gaura Kishoraya Sakshat Vairagya Murtaye Vipralambara Sambodhe Parambujayate Namaha Namo Bhakti Vinodaya Sakchidananda Namine Gaura Shakti Swarupaya Rupa Nuga Varayate Gaura Virbhava Bhomestvam Nirdesa Sajjana Priya Vaishnava Sarvabhauma Shri Jagannathaya Te Namaha Pancha Kalpatarobhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Mahabharanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gaura Trishe Namaha Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam Bhakta Rupa Swarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakyam Namami Bhakta Shaktikam He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Jayatam Sudato Pangor Mama Manda Matirgati Matsarvaswa Padambojo Radha Mananamohano Dibya Grindaranya Kalpadrumatha Srimad Ratnangana Sinhasanasto Srimad Radha Shila Govinda Deva Preshtali Sevyamanus Marami Srimad Rasa Rasarandi Vamshi Bhatata Taskitaha Karshan Venus Manir Gopir Gopinatha Shriyestu Naha Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamani Hari Priye Vrindayai Tulsi Devyai Priyayai Keshavasya Cha Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Satyavachai Namo Namaha Shri Nashinga Jai Nashinga Jai Jai Nanashinga Prahlada Desha Jaya Padma Mukha Padma Bringa Yada Yada Hi Dharmasya Glanir Bhavati Bharata Abhyutanam Adharmasya Tadatmanam Srajamyaham Paritranaya Sadhunam Vinashaya Chaduskritam Dharma Samstapanartaya Sambhavami Yuge Yuge Manmana Bhava Madbhakto Madhyaji Mam Namaskuru Mami Vaishyasi Yukvaivam Atmanam Matpadayanaha Sarvadharman Parityaja Mamekam Sharanam Braja Aham Tam Sarva Papebhyo Mokshayishami Masuchaha Shushushro Shradadhanasya Vasudeva Kataruchi Syam Mahat Sevaya Vipra Punyatirtha Shevanad Srinvatam Swakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtanaha Hridyantaksto Kyapadrani Vidunoti Suhritsatam Tashparaeshu Bhatreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Utamashloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki Tada Rajastamo Bhava Kama Loba Dayaschaye Cheta Eter Anavidham Stitam Satve Prasidati Evam Prasanna Manaso Bhagavad Bhakti Yogataha Bhagavad Tattva Vijnanam Mukta Sangasya Jayate Vidyate Hridaya Grantish Chijante Sarva Samshaya Shiyante Chasya Karmani Krishna Eva Manishvare Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Viprad Vishadguna Yutara Davindanaba Pada Davinda Vimukachrafacham Vadishtam Manyeta Tarpita Mano Vachane Hitarta Pranam Punati Sakulam Natupuri Manaha. If a Brahmana has all the 12 brahminical qualifications as they are stated in the book called Sunat Sujata, but is not a devotee and is averse to the lotus feet of the Lord, he is certainly lower than a devotee who is a dog eater, but who has dedicated everything, mind, words, activities, wealth, and life to the Supreme Lord. Such a devotee is better than such a Brahmana, because the devotee can purify his whole family, whereas the so-called Brahmana, in a position of false prestige, cannot purify even himself. So first, Prahlad Maharaj mentions the Vipra, or a greatly learned person. A Vipra is someone who's become learned in the Vedas. And Dvishat Guna Vyutad. He has 12 brahminical qualities. And then he says that such a person who's very learned, he knows everything, and he also has these qualities which are mentioned, that he's able to follow religious principles, speak truthfully, control the senses, austerities, penances, free from jealousy, intelligent, tolerant, no enemies, performing yajna, giving charity, being steady, being well versed in Vedic study, and so on, observing vows. But if he is averse to Pada Aravinda, Aravindanabha, the Lord who has a lotus navel. He doesn't believe in Krishna. He's against the idea of God. He's not interested in devotional service. Vimukhat. Then Prahlad says, Shwapacham. The Shwapacham is considered to be a low-class person because Shwapacham means somebody who cooks and eats dogs. So one comes into a family that cooks and eats dogs because of past sinful activities. So it means that somebody who's very sinful and has taken a very low birth. However, Prahlad is saying, Varishtam, that person who's from that kind of a background, and not that, Jiva Goswami clarifies in his explanation of this verse in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, that it's not that somebody just accidentally ate a dog once, but that someone was born into that culture, and that's what they do. They think it's a nice thing. And that person becomes more glorious than that Brahmin who has all these kind of qualifications but who's averse to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then, a very important word, manye. So this is Prahlad Maharaj speaking, and he is one of the great Mahajans. So, through logic, we cannot understand God, but and this is mentioned in the Vedanta Sutra, Tarko Pratishtanat means, Tarko means logic. Apratishtanat means it has no there's no foundation in logic, because there's always a better logician somewhere else. Someone may come up with an opinion and everyone will say, very good. And then someone else more expert in arguing will come along, a better Tarki. A person who argues about logic all the time is called a Tarki. So don't be a Tarki. Tarko Pratishtanat. Someone else comes along and argues a point and then defeats the other person. And this goes on endlessly in the material world. Everyone has a different opinion. And a Muni is not considered to be a Muni or a learned scholar unless he has a different opinion than somebody else. And someone may establish a doctrine, and then sometime later, 1,000 years later, someone will come and write a different one and defeat that person. Therefore, the Srimad Bhagavatam says we must follow in the footsteps of the Mahajans, because they carry the secret of devotional service in their hearts, and through their actions they show the real path of devotional service. Those Mahajans are mentioned, Swayambur Narada Shambhu, Komara Kapilo Manu, Praladho Janako Bhishmo, Vayasakir Vayam. That's the 12 Mahajans are mentioned, and Prahlad Maharaj is one of them. They also include Bali Maharaj, Lord Shiva, Shukadeva Goswami. And so the process, the Bhagavat process, is to hear what is said by the Mahajans and then follow in their footsteps. So this is practical. It's very practical. It means you can practice it. Tat tat karma pravartana. There are various activities that you can actually apply your senses to in life. That's what devotional service means. It's a kind of application. It's called Krishna Anushilanam. The word Anushilanam is used in the definitive verse describing what devotional service is, given in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Anya Abhilashita Shunyam Jnana Karamanyana Vratam Anukulyena Krishna Anushilanam Bhakti Richna Uttama. Uttam Bhakti means to perform favorable devotional service for the Lord, and that which is free from any tinges of mental speculation or fruit of activity, which means trying to adjust oneself in the material world, material desires. Anushilanam. Shil means cultivation. There is a kind of cultivation with the senses, that one must engage the senses in a certain way so that one gradually becomes elevated. It's active cultivation. Therefore, Prabhupada coined the phrase devotional service, because you could just say devotion. But then someone might just say, well, I have a lot of devotion. I just don't do anything about it. Just like someone might say when the wife comes home from a long day at work and the husband says, I almost cooked you something tonight because I really love you and I was thinking about it all night long that I should cook you something and I almost did it. I really meant to. Dear? People almost do a lot of things. But the proof is when one votes with one's feet, because the heart is the chariot or the driver. The body is the chariot and the heart is the driver. And the body goes where the heart is placed. That means that we prove ourselves by where we go, where we show up, what we actually do. Anushilana means, devotional service means how we actually practice. And Manye, Prahlad Maharaj, as the Mahajan, one of the recognized great souls, it means he's an authority on devotional service. He's giving his opinion. So this is gold. For devotees, this is gold, because he says, Manye. This is my opinion. This is what I think about this. So the devotees, they gravitate towards that. They say, okay, this is the standard, the gold standard, because Prahlad Maharaj has said it. Therefore, we take it. So, Manye. Then, Tadarpita means someone who's surrendered to the lotus feet of the Lord. Mana, with his mind. Vachana, with words. Ihita, every endeavor. Artha, with wealth. Pranam, with life. So these are different practical ways that we actually engage in Krishna's service. So one of them is mana, with the mind. And Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Manmana bhavamad bhakto, think of me. And then there's vachana, the words. Now this is very important because a fool is not discovered until he or she speaks. He had nothing to say, and then he said it. So Arjuna wants to know in the Bhagavad Gita, what is a sthita prajna? Somebody who's situated in full consciousness. And he wants to know from Arjuna, how does he speak? Because you can tell how someone is situated in life by how they speak. What are the words actually coming out? And a devotee understands this simple principle. This is practical. Atashri Krishna namadi na bhaved grayam indriye sevan mukhi jivado swayameva spuratyada. That yoga begins with the tongue. This is the opinion of the Shastra. The yoga begins with the tongue because the tongue is like a rudder, the rudder on a boat. It's even shaped like a rudder. And it determines which direction we go. So the words we speak are indicative of our consciousness, and they also take us in a certain direction. And when describing how devotees advance in devotional service through the process of chanting Hare Krishna, and that is that they develop attraction for the holy name of God, and then gradually their hearts melt, and then they gradually become like mad people, insane people, and they dance in public, they roll on the ground, they cry, they weep, they show all kinds of symptoms. This is a verse given by Srila Ishvara Puri to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who told Chaitanya Mahaprabhu when he gave him this verse from the Srimad Bhagavatam that this is the essence of the teachings of the Bhagavatam. Evambrata swapriya nama kirtya jatanu rago jita chuta ucher hasatyato rautiti rauti gayati unmadavan nrititi lokabhayaha. That when a person takes to the vow of chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. It's a devotional service, and the tongue and tongue must work. The ears are working. It's anushilanam. It's a cultivation. That gradually he becomes attracted to the name, becomes very pleasing, and the heart begins to melt. It softens. And then the heart becomes liquid like rose apple juice and flows like a river of rose apple juice, according to the Acharyas. And then the person becomes indifferent to the outsiders. Lokabaya, he doesn't care who's watching or anything. He doesn't even think about it. He's simply showing ecstatic symptoms. But the Acharyas have said some of the advanced devotees show these symptoms externally and others don't. But there's always two symptoms that an advanced devotee exhibits. One is steadiness, and the other is mukya prasada, which means merciful speech. When a person's heart has become free from the tendency to criticize others, which is mentioned by Rupa Goswami in the Upadeshamrita, Nindadi Shunya, the propensity to drag others down for the sake of one's own aggrandizement means there's envy in the heart. Matsarya means the inability to tolerate the eminence of another. I see someone else successful and I become extremely disappointed. And therefore the tongue says something like damnation by faint praise. Yeah, that was pretty good. That was all right. Yeah, it was pretty good, but anyway, forget it. The person loses the ability to actually appreciate others and glorify, and that comes out in the speech. So a person whose heart is clean is mukya prasada. When he or she speaks, it's actually prasad. The words are meant for the benefit of others. So this is a symptom of somebody advancing in devotional service. And vachanam, it comes out in the words, very important. Ihita means every endeavor. So, iha yasya hareda se karmana manasa gira nikila apya basta su jivan mukta se uchete. The jivan mukta, the person who's in a body but is liberated at the same time. You can have a material body but be liberated in that body, and that's described by Rupa Goswami. Iha, in this world, in this body, iha yasya harera dasye. That person is always engaged in all endeavors. That means body, mind, speech, everything's connected to Krishna. And that person then becomes liberated. So here Prahlad is describing the devotee who is in every endeavor engaged in the service of the Lord. And artha, wealth, gives away the wealth to Krishna. Because a devotee doesn't consider anything to be his. Or that Ishavasyam, and this verse solves all problems. Ishavasamidam sarvam yat kincha jagatyam jagat tena tektena bunjita magridha kastaswiddanam. The Sri Upanishad says everything animate or inanimate within the universe is controlled and known by the Lord. One should therefore accept only those things necessary for himself, which are set aside as his quota, and one should not accept other things, knowing well to whom they belong. Problem solved. No more anxiety. I know it belongs to Krishna. So the devotee has no problem giving his or her wealth to Krishna, because why would I keep it? It's just a burden. In fact, Brahmanas have a penchant for giving away everything they have. They don't keep anything because they don't want to be slowed down. If you're running away from a pack of wild dogs, and that's not fun. I've been chased by wild dogs before in Vrindavan. Banabhata scared them away with a mantra, though. But if you were being chased and you had to cross a river and you were carrying a big box of gold, and you'd probably sink if you were going to go, really slow you down, do you drop it and run, save your life, or do you hold? Or do you just let it go and swim across and escape? So this wealth, the Brahmins considered a burden, and they engage everything in Krishna's service. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur used to have his devotees always in a broke condition, always without any money. Whenever they'd get a big donation, he'd make them spend it right away and borrow more money. So they were always on that edge of anxiety, thinking like, where are we going to get more? As soon as you become flush and you have lots of money in the bank, full tank of gas, refrigerator's full, driving down the road thinking, life is good, I'm okay. Not very good. It's better, Queen Kunti said, Janmaishvara Shrita Shribira Edamana Madapuman Naivar Hatyadat Abidatum Vai Twama Kinchana Gocharam. That if you want to be constantly in touch with Krishna, don't be enamored of of all these opulences. Don't think I have something. I'm very beautiful, I have wealth, I have learning, I have. This is a great burden on the head of the devotee who's running away from death, who's running towards Krishna, engaging in the process of devotional service. It muddies the water of clear consciousness. And therefore she says, be a kinchana gochara. Kinchan means something. And akinchana means, I don't have anything. This is the right mentality through which to be able to constantly think of Krishna. I don't have anything. I'm a kinchan. And that's the person that Krishna notices. The person who's a kinchan gochara. So then the person engages the wealth and pranam, life. This is sort of, as Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, that the devotees are always engaged in speaking about me, and they give their very life to me. One's life energy is dedicated to Krishna. One gives one's heart, one's life, one's prana, one's energy is really reserved for Krishna. So then punati means purified. So such a person who's engaged like that can purify himself. And not only himself, but then kulam, his family as well. So this, Prabhupada says in the purport, is practical. You can see for yourself how a person becomes purified. And according to Shastra, in other places, this same statement is made that if you're from a low position, if you're born in a low family, if you engage in chanting Hare Krishna and engage in the process of devotional service, you take shelter of a Vaishnav, you engage in the surrender process, then you become transcendentalized, Devahuti, to her exalted son, who's the personality of Godhead, Kapiladev, says, Aho batashwa pachato gariyan yajiba grevartate nama tubhyam tepusta paste juhuvu sasna arya brahmanatur nama grananti yete. Oho means, oh, how wonderful it is that someone who has taken to that someone who can chant Hare Krishna, everyone please say Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. She says, Tepusta paste juhuvu sasna arya, that such a person has already performed all kinds of tapasyas. They've already gone to all kinds of holy places. They've performed the Vedic rituals previously. They're already qualified, more than a Brahmin. In fact, they become qualified to perform Vedic rituals if someone can say with the tip of their tongue, Tepusta paste juhuvu sasna arya. With the tip of their tongue, Jiva gre vartate nama tubhyam. It means, even if they say it a little bit, Hare Krishna, it means this person is is extraordinary and qualified. And so this is a very important verse. There's another one in which pardon me? That's a good verse, but I'm thinking of another one. And anyway, we'll come back in a minute. No. Yanamadeha Shravanadu Kirtanat, Yat Pravanat, Yat Smaranad Apikvachit, Shvadho Pisadya Savanaya Kalpate Kutak Podaste Bhagavanu Darshanat. This verse is parallel with the verse we're reading today, because it says that when someone's engaged in devotional service, this cultivation of devotional service, how by hearing, chanting, remembering the Lord, worshipping, and so forth, and this person, Yanamadeha Pravanadu Kirtanat, Yat Smanada, Yat Pravanad, Yat Smanada Apikvachit, Shradho Pisadya. There's the word again, Shradho. If one is a dog cooker, if one is a low-class person, Shradho Pisadya Savanaya Kalpate, that person becomes qualified to perform Vedic sacrifices. It means that that Brahmanism, all these qualifications are already included in that person's body. And they become free from all sinful reactions. So in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, there's a story about Sanatana Goswami. He had gone to Vrindavan, and then he went to see Lord Chaitanya in Jagannath Puri. And along the way, and the way was through the Jarikhanda forest. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had gone through the Jarikhanda forest. Sanatana ate sometimes, and sometimes he didn't. He got food sometimes he didn't. He drank whatever water he could find, and some of the water was bad. So he got an infection on his body. There were oozing sores on his body by the time he reached Jagannath Puri. By the time he got there, he was thinking, already he was such an exalted personality, so learned, so qualified. He knew 7 or 8 languages. He ran the whole government for the Nawab, and he had left to join Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And he was thinking, I'm such a low-class person. I've associated with low-class persons, and now my body is abominable. It's so abominable, I don't even want to go near any of the priests at the Jagannath temple, because if they touch me, they'll become contaminated. And so he was thinking on his way to Jagannath Puri that what I'll do is, I'll commit suicide when I get there. I'll wait till the Rath Yatra, until Lord Chaitanya is there at the Rath Yatra, and then Lord Jagannath comes out, Lord Chaitanya is there. What could be better? I'll just jump in front of the wheel, because I'm such a low person. And then in the presence of the Lord, I'll be, I'll attain some high, exalted destination because of this. So when he got to Jagannath Puri, he inquired, where's the house of Haridas Thakur? Haridas Thakur, because he was born in a Mohammedan family, he didn't go near the temple. He lived nearby, and nor would it have been socially acceptable for him to go in the temple. But Lord Jagannath, in the form of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, came to him every day because he was such an exalted devotee. He chanted the holy name of the Lord 300,000 times a day. That's 190 rounds. 190 rounds. So if you're having trouble with 16, just think about 190 rounds a day. That's something. So he reached the house of Haridas Thakur, little hut where Haridas would chant, and just at that time he offered his obeisances, and Haridas Thakur said, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu will be here any minute, and sure enough, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came, and Haridas Thakur offered his obeisances to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and said, there is Sanatana Goswami offering obeisances. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu embraced Sanatana Goswami, but Sanatana was trying to resist because he was saying, no, my body is contaminated with these oozing sores. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu didn't care. He'd embrace him anyway. And this concerned him very much. So he was thinking about this suicide idea. And the next time Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came back to visit, he said to Sanatana Goswami, not knowing anything, no one had told him about this, Sanatana hadn't told anyone else, but Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said to him, this idea you have about committing suicide is not very good. And at that moment, Sanatana Goswami could understand the omniscience of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He understands my mind. And then Mahaprabhu said that if I could attain Krishna, if I could attain Krishna Prema by committing suicide, I would have already done it millions of times. And then he said, devotees, because of feeling intense separation from Krishna, sometimes think about committing suicide. But in that separation, because there's union and separation, then they become satisfied, and then they don't commit suicide. There's an example given of Rukmini Devi when she wanted to marry Krishna. She had heard about Krishna. She's not met Krishna, but she was meditating that I have to marry Krishna. And she was praying, please let me marry Krishna. Meanwhile, her brother, Rukmi, had this other plan that she was going to marry Shishupal. And Shishupal when he was born, when babies first start to talk, how old are they when they first start to babble? 1, 2? Depends. Okay, 1-year-old, they start to babble and they say whatever. And then, so Shishupal, when he first starts to babble, it's all blasphemy of Krishna. That's how he came out as a little baby. That's Shishupal's life. So her brother wants to get her married to this Shishupal, and her heart's melted for Krishna. So she's praying, Krishna, please rescue me, get me out of this situation. And then she made in one of her prayers that she sent through a Brahmin to Lord Krishna, she said that great devotees like Lord Shiva, they bathe in the dust of your lotus feet in order to purify themselves. And she said, and my aspiration is to attain your lotus feet. And if I can't attain your lotus feet, if I can't get your mercy, then I'll perform all kinds of severe austerities like fasting so that I'll give up this body many, many times. Over and over again, I'm prepared to give up this body so that finally I can attain your mercy. So this is one of the moods of the devotees, that they're ready to give up their life to attain devotional service. As I mentioned yesterday, the Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj told his disciples that they should be steady at all costs in devotional service. Even at the cost of their life, they should be steady in devotional service. This is the mood. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu then again was embracing Sanatana Goswami, and Sanatana was in great anxiety about this. And he said, please, my body is abominable. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu then said, actually, I consider your body to be transcendental. And in that section of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, there's a discussion about how when a devotee surrenders his or her body in the service of the Lord, that he or she no longer has a material body. And he or she may not also have a spiritual body, but you have an interim kind of body. First we have a deha, a body, but then when you surrender to Krishna in devotional service, in other words, you make a vow, you take initiation. This is mentioned in the text that Dikshakali Bhaktakari Atma Samarpan, Shekali Krishnatari Bhaktakari Krishna Atmasam. So this means that at the time of Diksha, initiation, which means that Atma Samarpana, you're giving your soul, you're saying, I give up everything to Krishna. I'm surrendering to a Vaishnav. I'm taking this initiation. And I'm saying that no longer my life, but it's Krishna's life. I'm dedicating everything to Krishna. And in that state, then Krishna says, okay, you're as good as me. You're on the spiritual platform. And then you get what's called a sadhaka deha. It means you're not perfect yet. You don't have your spiritual body hasn't fully manifested, but the material body that you were born with is no longer a material body. It's now a practitioner's body, and it's transcendentalized. And it's kind of like you may join a team, and then you may not be even one of the players, but even if you sit on the bench, you're still considered, you still get to wear the uniform, and if you win the championship, you still get the ring. So you're in the game in a major way when you say, I surrender, you take initiation, this is the process, you get a sadhaka deha, and then you have a practitioner's body. And so Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was explaining how you actually become transcendentalized. The body becomes transcendental. And he also referred to these verses that I referred to earlier from the Srimad Bhagavatam mentioned by Devahuti. So, after Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had tested Sanatana Goswami, he embraced him, and his body was cured of those itching sores. And Haridas Thakur said, now I see this is one of your pastimes. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had just shown how the body, had performed that pastime to show how the body of a devotee is not an ordinary body, but one who's given mind, body, soul, everything to Krishna, has become purified, is better than a Brahmin, and that is a practical matter. If we follow in the footsteps of Prahlad Maharaj and take to the cultivation of devotional service, then gradually, from whatever situation we're in now, we'll be able to come to the perfectional stage of life. Om Tat Sat. So now we have time for some questions and some reflections.
By dog eater, is it meant to be a meat eater or something else? Because we don't usually see people eating dogs. And how can a devotee be a dog eater?
Yeah, it means a meat eater. People do eat dogs, though, in other countries. The Philippines, they eat dogs. And it means, as I said earlier, that you know, if you're born into a family like that, you have a very sinful past, because that now you're taking up where you left off in your last life. And a devotee may be born into a family like that. In fact, even Prahlad Maharaj is saying, as he said in the previous verse, that all these demigods, they're offering prayers to you, but I'm Ugrajate, I come from a demoniac family. Hiranyakashipu was like a Rakshasa. So he's saying that's where this is my background. So a devotee may come from that kind of a situation, and then when he or she takes to devotional service, that even that type of body and mind becomes purified by the power of devotional service. Kirata hunandra pulinda pulkasha abhira shumba yavana katsadaya yenecha papa yadapashraya shaya shudyanti tasmai prabhavishnave namaha. Shukdev Goswami says, doesn't matter where you're from, doesn't matter what kind of body or background you have, because Vishnu is so powerful, if you connect to him through the devotees and take to the process of devotional service, you'll become completely purified. And that's what it means. Someone may be born in a low family and then take to devotional service. They're not to be considered a low-class person. Like sometimes Smarta Brahmins say that, okay, I know you're practicing devotional service, but you have to take another birth and be born into a Brahmin family, and then you can actually become a Brahmin. But Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, in pointing out the Shastra and defeating these Smarta Brahmins, gave the Brahminical thread to people who took to the Vaishnava practices. In other words, when people would take Vaishnava Diksha, he would give them the Brahmin's thread just to show that they've become qualified as Brahmins. It meant something in India. Nowadays it doesn't mean anything. Someone sees you with a thread, they just say, what's the string? They don't know the culture. But Srila Bhakti, normally, actually, Vaishnavas, traditionally, they would take off their Brahmin's thread, because in Brahminical culture, the father gives the Brahmin's thread to the son when he comes at a certain age, and he gives him the Brahma Gayatri mantra. So he has the thread, because he's in a Brahmin family. If you're a Brahmin, you can pass it on. It's kind of a hereditary idea. So this verse is saying that there's these hereditary Brahmins, and as I was saying, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, when he would give initiation to somebody that would not from a Brahmin family, Vaishnava initiation, then he would give them the Brahmin's thread. So you're also qualified as a Brahmin. Wear the thread, because he was showing that this connecting to Krishna through the holy names and through the Bhagavat Marg, and taking shelter of a Vaishnava in disciplic session, the power is there to purify you. It's proved in this verse. It's the point of this verse. It also means that if you happen to see somebody who's from a low-class background or even has very bad habits, but they're chanting Hare Krishna, you would consider them in a very favorable light, even if they weren't completely purified, even if they had really base habits, because you would know that very soon they'll come to the perfect condition. And this is the vision of a Vaishnava. Vaishnavas are udaradi, they're broad-minded, they're Mahatmas. So some people judge others by what they've done in the past, and others judge them by how they are now. They may say, I know you did that in the past, but now you're like this, so I accept you. But Vaishnavas, they judge people how they're going to be in the future based on the fact that they're connected to Krishna. Even if they're not there now, they're so broad-minded. And that's how Prabhupada was. He saw everyone and he said, oh no, you're a devotee, come on in. Because he said, if you connect to this, if you're saying Hare Krishna, you're exalted. Because of understanding the power of the holy name and connection to chanting Hare Krishna, that one will come to the perfectional stage step by step. So if you're walking down the street and you hear a Harinam Sankirtan going in, and it just happens to be in the house where they're serving out dog or something like that, I mean, you'll be surprised, but at the same time, you'll have a feeling that well, these people, there's something powerful going on here. You won't disparage them. Yeah. It was a tie. Tie goes to the runner. Hare Krishna.
Prabhupada quoted one verse that Bhagavad Gita that mentions that japa tapo. So, what kinds of japa and tap described over there?
Can you say that again?
Prabhupada.
Yeah, the verse. So, Prabhuji is referring to the verse in the purport, which says, Bhagavad bhaktihinasya jati shastram japastapaha pranasyaiva dehasya mandanam lokaranjanam. If one is born in a high family like that of a Brahmana, Kshatriya, or Vaishya, but is not a devotee of the Lord, all his good qualifications as a Brahmana, Kshatriya, or Vaishya are null and void. Indeed, they are considered decorations of a dead body.
What is the meaning of japa and tapo?
Japa means that they're tapa, they're performing austerities, and japa, I don't know. I have to look more carefully at the verse. Not familiar. Mahabhagavat.
So, in this verse it is said that a person engaged in devotional service, regardless of their background, is more exalted than a person who has the Trishad Guna. Does that mean that the person
More exalted than the person who has Trishad Guna but doesn't believe in Krishna. Yeah.
devotional service? So does that mean that, because someone might say, well, the qualities that are in this person are not manifested in the person who is performing devotional service. So you're just being sentimental here. What are you saying? How is that person superior? So how to understand that?
Well, it's mentioned in the verse itself that you can see practically, and Prabhupada says it in the purport, that a person who may not have all of those Brahminical qualities yet, but has this penchant for pure devotional service, can purify himself. That means he will become purified, and also he purifies his family. And Prabhupada mentions in the purport how practically he's heard one of the devotees, obviously a European devotee, whose mother inquired about Krishna at the time of death when she's leaving her body. And we see practically how devotees actually are able to affect others. Even in the early days when the first devotees joined the movement, and they were just coming off of, heavy LSD trips, a lot of them, and all who knows what else, full-on counterculture. But because they took to the process of devotional service, they were able to change England into a Vaishnav holy place. They flew there just with armed with this faith and the practice of devotional service, and they just went out and chanted in the rain and the fog, and they went to see the Beatles, and finally they put out a record. Miracles happened, and people who came in contact with them, you can see all kinds of people in society. They had money, they had influence and everything, and they would come in contact, and then they would start to become purified because of the effect that's coming down through them, through the disciplic succession, because they were following. Amazing ways that people's families become purified also. Yes, Annalise.
Speaking about purifying your family, if members of your family are favorable to devotional service, how can you encourage that?
Well, if they're favorable, it's easier to encourage them. Cooking's nice, Prasadam is always a nice thing. Cultural things are always, I mean, it depends how favorable they are. I mean, in India, people are so pious that I hear this all the time. Somebody joins the temple and they start following. They say, yeah, I'm going to call my parents. And then 2 weeks later, it's like, they're chanting 16 rounds now. Yeah, they gave up all the regulative principles. They're following 16 rounds. It's, Prabhupada said in India, just below the surface, you scratch below the surface and that piety's there. And, if you're fortunate enough to be in a family where people are open-minded and they like it, devotional service, there's all kinds of things you can do. Just, watch and see what they like and give it to them. Usually, I mean, if someone's just coming along, then, cooking prasadam is always a good bet. And then you can kind of see gradually how to introduce things. Krishna kind of leads the way, one thing after another. It helps out. Yes, you had a point, and then we'll go over to Mangalarti. Right here. Sorry.
That information was what you do when someone in your family is very adverse to Krishna? You stay away from them because simply for friends, or what do you do?
If somebody's very averse in your family, and what do? Well, one thing is, it's hard to preach to parents, even when they're favorable, they don't like it because they're like, wait a minute, you're my kid, you don't preach to me. See, I preach to you, and so you have to be a good example, and over time, actually, these things have their effect. If somebody's very averse, how do you deal with them? In a very delicate way. When you go it depends how averse they are. I mean, we had situations in the 1980s, especially, end of the 70s and the early 80s, when parents of devotees would hire someone to kidnap them. And then this was called deprogramming. It's a big deal. They would kidnap the devotee off the street. They would take him to a professional, what they called deprogrammer, because they thought, they're just brainwashed. So they would take them to a house where all the doors were locked, windows were shut, and then they would, subject them to all kinds of torture and constant berating of the process of devotional service and all this, until they would, finally say, okay, I give up, I renounce it. 99% of the time, either the devotee would escape, or they would say, okay, yeah, I don't like devotional service, and then as soon as they let him out of the car, they'd run back to the temple. But it was, that's averse. I mean, a lot of parents were averse. But even some parents like that, I know some devotees who were quote-unquote deprogrammed, who are doing fine in the movement, whose parents have now become favorable. And so you kind of have to watch and see where there's an opening. And we have this term, fan the spark. If you see a spark, fan it. In the meantime, you sort of have to be patient with them and deal with them as little as possible if they're giving you a really, really hard time about it. Mangalarti.
Well, I have two questions. One, you were giving example of Kapila Goswami and how when Lord Chaitanya came and he knew his mind and he could understand the normal sense of Krishna. And I was thinking in our own lives, while doing devotional service or while just going through life, like whatever material stuff one has to go through, oftentimes this thought can cross the mind that nobody knows what I'm going through, nobody knows my struggle, Does anyone know, this and that? This feeling comes in. And oftentimes the devotee might have to ask themselves, isn't it enough that Krishna knows? But how to keep feeling alive in the heart, because how can one be sincere if you're thinking that, oh, this person should know and that person should know and so should reciprocate like this thing if I'm going through this struggle, as opposed to depending on Krishna and knowing that Krishna knows and will do what is required. But how to keep that feeling? Because this feeling of Krishna knows, it's a really advanced kind of a thing, but how do we in our basic stages of bhakti, keep that feeling alive? Otherwise, you won't always have 50 devotees around you trying to cheer you up, be a cheerleader for you? How do you do that? I don't know if I'm clearly explaining.
Yeah, it's clear. One thing I've mentioned in this in previous classes is that it's important to have a confidant, somebody who you can speak to about everything. You have to have at least one person like that in your life in devotional service, that you can tell your problems, what's going on, and listen to what's going on with them. Not just problems, but also realizations, so you can process them. It's an important outlet to have a close friend. So if you don't have one, get one. And also, these kinds of trials and tribulations that we go through, where we think only Krishna knows in my heart, are favorable for developing a relationship with Krishna in our heart. And I've told this to managers, because management is extremely stressful. When you manage a movement, which means people, there's always some kind of conflict. It's just the way people are. And there are always hard decisions. Decisions don't come well defined usually, unless you're like, a kind of person, right, wrong, but never in doubt. But if you like to think things over and try to do the right thing, then decisions are often, you have to consider them very deeply, and they put a lot of pressure on you. And so there's a way in which you might start feeling only Krishna knows, and then you might turn to Krishna, like to Super Soul, and say, it's just me and you now, because nobody knows, the kind of anxiety I'm going through. And there's a kind of intimacy in that. When you wake up in the morning and you realize, I have a lot of hard decisions to make today, you'll start praying to Krishna and saying, Krishna, you're the only one that can understand what I have to go through. And in that deep kind of prayer, under that kind of pressure,